All right, welcome back to the Atlanta Child Murders Revisited. This is 29 October. This is video number 10, and we're going to pick up again at WSB. And as you can see right there, there is the sign for WSB. Now, like I said, it used to be called White Columns. And, if I'm not mistaken, there were two channels here. I think channel 11 was like in the back part and then they moved or something. It it seems that I remember it like that, um, but I'm not sure. But I always remember right at you could look up Peachtree right there, and you saw this building with these white columns, and I think it was right there. That's like a new building. So since what, the 30s or 40s, there was a building there. Oh, maybe the 40s or 50s, I guess, for a TV station. Um, and it had white columns. So they used to call the home of WSB White Columns. I just always remember that. My mom actually, when she was dating Thieves, lived like right down this road here, like over in this neighborhood, closer to Piedmont, I believe, Piedmont Street. But sometimes we would cut over there behind Colony Square. Sometimes we would come up this way and go back that way. And I always remember as a little kid looking up and seeing these white columns. And I said, Mom, what's the white columns? And she said, Oh, that's WSB, the TV station. And she goes, Don't you remember? And I said, No. And she says, Well, they had a children's show like on a Saturday, and you were on that show back in like 1960. No, 19. What was it? 1966, 67, when my mom and my dad first lived here. I was like a little baby. I mean, maybe 1, 2 years old, and I guess they had a bunch of kids on the show, and it was some kind of a kid show. But she brought me here to White Columns, and I was on the TV show. I don't remember, but anyway. So like I said, this is where Wayne would drive up this road, turn over here, come into back there, and he would drop off his videos that he had taken the previous night. Like in my last video, he was a night stalker. What do they call it? There was a certain word they use. I can't remember. But basically, they gave him a camera, and he would drive around, and he had a little police scanner. He had his little blue police car with the police lights, and he would run around trying to get stories and stuff. And of course, being a contractor like that, you're not going to make a lot of money, um, and because they'll take your 10-minute video. And if you notice, all the news stories are all about 45 seconds or a minute and a half if it's a really good story. And it's amazing how much information they can edit down into a minute and a half. So they would take his, so he would leave his tape, leave his name and everything, and then come back the next morning and, oh, you used my tape on your news. And then they would, maybe like once a week, every 2 weeks, accounting would give him a check or something like that, and he would keep track of it. And he was under the tutelage of Jocelyn Dorsey, who was also a news anchor there. There was Monica Kaufman. Jocelyn Dorsey was sort of like a anchor news person. There was also Mark Picard. I don't know if you remember Mark Picard, but he was on all over the Atlanta child murders. He was constantly interviewing police, constantly interviewing um, family members, parents of the victims, friends of the victims, neighbors, all this stuff. Mark Picard was all over this case. His notes were extensive. He probably had a good idea what was going on from word on the street. And I remember in the Atlanta Monster, he was talking about it, and he talked about they used to go down to Georgia State and interview the psychologist about why would someone be doing this, and the psychologist had no idea, but he looked in the camera and said, I tell you one thing, the guy is watching the news right now. And when they do catch him, you're going to recognize him. Okay. He's going to be somebody you know. Okay. Which that's kind of interesting. And then we see Mark Picard when the news media is camped out in front of Wayne Williams' house. When Homer Williams comes stomping out, points at Mark Picard, says, "Come here." He does. They go inside, and Wayne Williams gives him an exclusive interview, not with the cameras, but just with the tape recorder. And then like the next day, Wayne, or a couple of days later, Wayne does his interview where he passes out his resume to all this news media, and deny all this shit that he is the the killer. Okay, so that was Mark Picard, and then there was Dale Caldwell. I mentioned about him how he had he was an investigative news reporter. I don't think he was around at the time of the Atlanta child murders. He showed up like in the 80s and 90s. And he said one time he was at a Dairy Queen in the 90s, and a guy came up behind him and said, "Hey, you're Dale Caldwell, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "I got a story for you, but I don't think you have the balls to investigate it." And he goes, "Well, I don't know. Give me, lay it on me. Give me, hit me with what you got." And he said that Sheriff Sidney Dorsey is using his sheriff men um, that are on the payroll of the county of DeKalb County and running them out to work on his private security company for various clients like banks and stuff like that. And so he said, "Okay, I'll take a look at it." And so he started investigating and found out there was massive corruption in the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department. Now, Sidney Dorsey had been an investigator on the Atlanta Murdered Children's Task Force. And after Wayne was convicted, he came out like in the late 80s, early 90s saying that he didn't believe that Wayne Williams killed anybody, which is kind of interesting to me. So if you're the lead investigator and you're reading everything that I'm reading, and I'm just a layman, okay, it's pretty fucking clear that Wayne was involved in all the murders, not just some, but all of the murders, okay? So how he can make a statement like that, you got to wonder what's going on there. And I think what was going on is in the black community, okay, which were the majority voters in DeKalb County and Fulton County, the vast majority didn't believe that Wayne Williams killed anybody, okay? And so what he was doing, just like all the other elected officials in Fulton and DeKalb County, they were playing up again, playing to the voters, okay, not telling them that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, okay. So that's the last way to get votes. You don't want to get up there and say, "Look, I want you to vote for me for sheriff, but you're completely wrong in the Atlanta child murders. I was an investigator. Wayne Williams killed them all. I saw the evidence. You didn't. You don't know what the hell you're talking about." No one will vote for you. So that's what I think he was doing. It's exactly what his predecessor did after that, about 2005, when he reopened the cases in DeKalb County. And then as soon as he got elected, he dropped the investigation. And the same thing with Keisha Bottoms, 2019. She's going to have to run again, the next year, 2020, 2021, something like that. And what did she do? She sent the DNA off, opened up the case, and says she's opened up the case again, and then completely dropped it like a hot potato and ran off to a comfy little DC job. But now she's back saying she wants to be your governor. But anyway, but Chadwell, if you listen to him, I haven't really delved too much into his story, but I'm just going by what he said. He found out that Dorsey was completely corrupt. He had no oversight on the massive budget for the sheriff's office. He was hiring people that weren't qualified, that never went to police academy, and appointing them sheriff's deputies. And they ran the largest jail this side east of the Mississippi, and had a multi-million-dollar budget with no oversight at all. And then he was also, you know, renting out his sheriff deputies through his private security company that he owned while he was sheriff, and making money on that. And then there was blackmails that was going on. He was also very violent. He was known to pull guns and shoot at people for no reason. So, but he was popular because he went after the criminals. He didn't care about their rights, but he went after them and locked them up and made people feel safe. Okay. So that's why he was pretty damn popular. Well, another guy came around named Derwin Brown, who'd worked under Dorsey, and he ran for sheriff and he won the election. And it shocked Dorsey. And Dorsey had his henchmen eliminate Derwin Brown, but also had a hit list on, because by this time, because of Chadwell's investigation on the news, the district attorney of DeKalb County was also investigating Dorsey. Okay, so one night, this is what Chadwell says, on a rainy night, he got a call from the DeKalb County Police. Now, the DeKalb County Police is different than the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. And they said, Mr. Chadwell, this is the DeKalb County Police. Are you okay? And he goes, yes. Well, we're at the front of your door. We need you to come outside and talk to us. And he did. And they explained to him how Derwin Brown had just been gunned down at his house, and they believed the same assassins were on their way to his house to assassinate him. They found a hit list, and they think that they were just minutes away from the assassins coming and killing him. And Chadwell was, pretty shooken up about that. And he and the district attorney, they ran around with bodyguards. When he would do his stories to go to the news, he had a bodyguard, armed bodyguard, policeman. And so they eventually convicted Dorsey, convicted his cohorts, and sent him off to prison. Of course, you'll hear this guy who's anybody but Wayne defender, Dwayne Hendricks, on the Atlanta Monster talk about how, Dorsey's the key to it all. He has all the information that proves Wayne didn't kill anybody. Well, they wrote Sidney Dorsey in jail, and he wrote him back, and he said, I have no evidence either proving or disproving that Wayne was or wasn't the Atlanta child murderer. So what he was doing, it was just saying stuff to get the votes. Okay. He was siding with people's misbeliefs instead of telling them the truth. Okay. This is what some politicians do. They're not going to tell you the truth. Okay. They're going to tell you what you want to hear, so you'll vote for them. And we see the same thing going on with Trump. He doesn't dare tell the truth about anything. And it's all made up fantasy bullshit lies. He lives in a separate reality. Okay. So that's Dorsey. Now we're going to back up a little bit and go back south a little bit. We're going to go up Peachtree to Buckhead, and I'm going to hit certain offices or certain places that are related to the Atlanta child murders and related to Michael Thevis. All right. So hold on one second. And so I knew that Thevis was a Greek name. Okay. So I started looking here, and very interesting what you'll find. It says the surname Thevis derives from an old High German name Theofred, meaning divine peace. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but they were Goths. Goths were from Sweden and Germany, and they invaded and settled into Greece back during the time of the Byzantine Empire, and specifically down near the area of Sparta. And they intermarried with the local Greeks there. So that can see how Thebes would be one of those names there. Now, if you read on, it said, or the old French name Thebes, a diminution of Theobald, bold people. It can also be a variant of the Scottish name Tavis or Davis, which means son of David or twin. Okay. And we'll keep going here. Let's see. Where did I find that? Dun, dun, dun. Ah, here we go. So read this one. It says right here, the surname Thieves is a German of German origin derived from Middle High German word Thieves, which means thief. Okay. Now you remember how I said that these Spartans who became the Maniotes, they also were given the nickname Kleps. Kleps was one of their tribes, I believe. And Klept is where we get the root word for thief, kleptomania, kleptocracy. It's a word that the Turks gave them. It was a Greek word the Turks gave them, okay? So that makes perfect sense, which describes exactly what Thieves does. There's also, where is it? If I can just find this here. Hold on one second. I came across something that was very, very fascinating. Um, Old French. Hold on. The Scottish meaning. Scottish meaning of Thieves. Hold on. I'm going to put you on hold 1 second here, and then we'll come back to it. All right. We're back, and hold on 1 second. All right. This is interesting. So it says Thieves, which is a variation of Thieves, possibly origins of the surname include a link to Scottish name Tavis, descent from the name of Thomas, which is Greek, Aramaic, and of Hebrew origin, and means twin, double, and Gemini. Gemini, my friends, it says Gemini, the word Gemini comes from the Latin word Gemini, meaning twins. The astrological sign is named after the twin figures of Castor and Pollux in Greek and Roman theology. What did Wayne Williams call his musical group? Gemini. Did he name it Gemini because Wayne and everyone in the group were all Geminis born from the evening of May 21st to the evening of 21 June, of which many of the victims were Geminis? Almost everyone that was in Wayne Williams' little group that he had together, his little gang, were all Geminis. Jimmy Howard was a Gemini. Nathaniel Cater was a Gemini. Nathaniel Cater was killed on the first night of the astrological sign of Gemini, the 21st of May. Now, whether you believe any of that crap about astrological signs or not, it doesn't really matter. All it matters is that Wayne believes it. But here we have another connection between Wayne Williams and his godfather, his mentor, Michael Thieves, who's sitting in prison right there at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. He's naming his fucking group Gemini in honor of him and also his astrological sign. It's incredible, folks. It's absolutely fucking incredible. Also, Jimmy Howard will say that before Gemini, Wayne worked on an all-female group he had called Silk. Okay, and Wayne always wore these silk-looking acetate shirts that I talked about. A witness that saw Joseph Bell get into the white station wagon at the basketball court said the guy was wearing a silk shirt. When I saw Wayne, he was wearing a silk-looking shirt that was flayed. You know, the collar was flayed out. It was white with like black, like a cow splotches on it. It looked silk to me, but it was acetate. Okay, but it wasn't violet. It was like white acetate. So there we go. There's another connection between Wayne Williams and Michael Thieves with the Gemini connection right there. I know, maybe it's a stretch, but I'm trying to think of every possibility because we can't get in the mind of Wayne Williams, but we can speculate, we can make connections on things that are out there. All right. So let's go down here. Hold on one second. Got to scroll down quite a bit. Very slow internet. So this is what you do when you're doing an investigation. You take the evidence that you come across because you don't know what's going on. You don't know the motivation. You can't get in the mind of the killer. But you take all the clues, the evidence, and you kick it around. You speculate. Well, maybe he's doing it because of this. Well, does that evidence line up with that? Okay. Or maybe he's doing it because of that. Well, does this evidence line up with that? And that's what you have to do. Okay. Again, unless Wayne comes out and tells us, we don't know what's going on in his mind. All we can do is speculate. Now, what they did in the trial is they took away the speculation, they took away the motivation and the cause, and they just stuck to the meat and potatoes of Wayne did it, and here's the evidence showing that he killed the kids, and don't talk about anything else. Because once you get into speculation, then you've got a hell of a lot higher level of evidence and things to prove. It's best in a very complicated case with very little evidence, like you had here, to stick to the meat and potatoes and just prove that he did it. And that's what Slayton did. All right, so we have. Let's see how we're working on time here. Yeah, there we go. All right, so we have 708 Northwest Spring Street. This is Adaman. This is where Nathaniel Cater and Mickey McIntosh would come and work. Okay, and let's take a look at that area. It's not there anymore, but what I'm going to do is go across and just give you kind of a feel, although it's difficult because a lot of these buildings are gone, for where they were hanging out and what they were going and how close together they were. Okay. All right. So let's go here. Because people aren't like missiles. They don't just go to one place and detonate and that's it. They take in the entire environment. Okay. They ride the bus to here, walk up over to there, all that. So right here is Adaman, okay? And right here is Techwood. And actually, it was right here that Michael Thieves, I think it was right here, had his little newsstand right off of North Avenue in Georgia Tech, right there. So you see, oh, it disappeared. Yeah, right there. So there's a building there now. So we'll move on to the next one. But as you see, okay, there's the Biltmore Hotel where I stayed. There's Cypress Avenue where the male prostitutes are hanging out. Okay. Right down here off West Peachtree is a Cameo Lounge. Okay. Where Nathaniel Keeter would go and hook and prostitute. Okay. And if he wasn't there, he was probably over here on Cypress Avenue picking up Johns. Okay. And of course, right what? Right here is the Fox Theater. Right here is where um, Alfred Evans went to the karate movie, or at least that's where he said he was going. We don't know if he ever made it there. All right, let's go on to the next one. Got 760. This is the Sansuchi Lounge. This is where Wayne said he went. He has 3 different stories, and so the night of the 21st, he said he went there to pick up a tape recorder. Um, you know, and other stories with the FBI and with the news media, he said he didn't go there until Friday night. Other stories, he said he went there after he had his little incident with the police. Other stories, he did it before he had his incident with the police. It goes back and forth, and you never know exactly what to believe. But that was it right there. Oh, no. Is that, yeah, on West Peachtree. There's another building there now, of course. And the Sansuchi Lounge is history and gone. There's a Silver Dollar Saloon and the Cameo Lounge on Spring Street. Okay. That's where Nathaniel Keeter was going and working. And then we've got Jimmy Mays. Now, remember Jimmy Mays back in September of 1973. Okay. Thieves had Roger Underhill get someone build the bomb, and then they put the bomb in Jimmy Mays' van. And when he went out to crank up the van, it blew up. And the reason that Thieves ordered this is because he had done exactly what Hannah did. So when Hannah was killed, Jimmy Mays was making the little cinematics machines for the video booths, okay? Or the porn booths. And then again, once Jimmy Mays saw the money that Thieves was bringing in and what little money he was getting, he quit, went his own way, and started doing the same thing that Japana did. Started making the little machines and selling them to Thieves' competitors. Okay, Thieves didn't like that, and matter of fact, I think Jimmy Mays even bought a porn theater. Like it was like one of these buildings right here was one of his porn theaters. I think like Thieves owned this porn theater, and then like behind it or next to it, Jimmy Mays had bought a porn theater, was working with that. And so Jimmy Mays had parked his van in this parking lot. I think it was right by the building because I've seen the video and it's right by the building. And he goes out, gets in his van, cranks up his van, and boom, boom, boom. The whole van blows up. Metal and body parts all over the parking lot. Now, standing nearby, probably over here, was Roger Underhill. And Roger Underhill walked over quickly, picked up these bone fragments and then left before the police and the fire rescue got there. They did an investigation. They never able to find out who did the bomb. Um, although the informants that the FBI had and the police had speculated it was probably Thieves. They knew it was somehow related to the pornography underworld. Later on, Underhill would go to prison and then turn state witness and go into the witness protection program, and he would fill in the details about how Thieves got him to make the bomb and place the bomb out there to kill Mays, and also involvement with killing Jap Hanna, of which that earned Roger Underhill the death sentence, okay? And which Thieves tried to have him killed numerous times in jail. And actually, that was one of the reasons why Underhill went to the police, okay? Because he was going to get killed in jail if he stayed in there on his own. So, let's see, we'll keep moving up the road here. Now, right up the road, of course, we were here earlier. This is how my mom met Thieves. Was Eugene Smith, okay? And Eugene Smith had his little office right there at Colony Square, 1175, Northeast Atlanta. Now, back in 1972, 73, Thieves was trying to launder his money, so he bought all these different music labels, of which one was Grapevine Music. Grapevine Music, eventually, after Thieves goes to prison, will end up under General Record, GRC, and then that'll be end up being handed over to Jimmy Gin and his Gin Music, and they own the rights to that music from Grapevine, all these other labels, even to this day. Okay, so there's Eugene Smith. Now, when Jap Hanna is killed, the police locate Eugene Smith. Okay, start questioning him, and then Thieves comes back like a couple of days later, and I've seen video of him being interviewed, and Thieves is very nervous because he didn't know if the police are going to get him or not. Um, and Eugene Smith defends Thieves and says, no, Thieves wasn't involved. They liked Jap Hanna and all this kind of lying bullshit. But right there again, that is at Colony Square. And that's where my mom was a security guard, and that's how she met Thieves. Because she used to take me into Eugene Smith's um, office there. She would lock me in the office, and I would play in the office on the furniture and everything, look down Peachtree Street, and then she would do her rounds, and then she would come back. So that's how my mom met Thieves. And then to show that he's still active, in 18 November 1981, what had happened, of course, I have to explain all this to make connections in case you don't watch all the videos. So the Apogee Studio, which is right down there off of Simpson, okay, and it was changed when Thieves went to prison. It was changed to the Sound Pit Studio. Later on, that's where Wayne Williams would bring the kids, interview them, take pictures, record them, and then hang out with them in the hot tub discussing their music career. Okay. And again, that was just 2 blocks away from the Atlanta Missing and Murdered Children's Task Force. They could have just gone out the fucking back door and probably saw some of the kids going into the sound pit. Well, like I said, in April of 1981, the IRS finally figured it out. They seized the sound pit, okay, even though it was being run by Jimmy Gin. They figured it out that, Thieves was still running it, okay. They put it on auction. Jimmy Gin put up $400,000 of Thieves' money. They won the bid but didn't get the money in time, so the IRS gave it to Kinder. When they did that, Jimmy Gin sued the IRS with the help of an attorney by the name of Ed Garland. And then the judge threw out the case. So in November 1981, they created Atlanta Sound Pit Productions, Atlanta Sound Pit um, Records and Movies also. Um, and the lawyer for that was at Colony Square, Suite 2000, not 2200. This is his son, Eugene Smith's son, William Smith. Okay, and there's another attorney by the name of Ron Freeman, and you see Jimmy Jen right there. Now, in the same building, okay, um, there was the office of Senator Paul Coverdell. Senator Coverdell had a law office a little further up Peachtree Street. It's not there anymore, but back in the summer of 19, Senator Coverdell was a Republican, okay, and back in the summer of 1984, I just graduated from high school, and I was a big Reagan fan. I was a Reagan Democrat, and Walter Mondale was running. He was the vice president under Jimmy Carter. Very, very weak guy from Minnesota, and he talked like this. This is Walter Mondale. Hi, I'm going to be your president. Okay. Well, anyway, he ran against Reagan and got his ass kicked. Okay. But I don't know why. I figured I would help out with the campaign. It was pretty damn obvious that Reagan was going to sweep Georgia, so I don't even know why I even bothered. But I felt patriotic, wanted to do something. And so I called up the Republican Party. Now, running the Republican Party in Georgia was Senator Paul Coverdell. I don't think he was a senator at that time. I think he ran in the 90s as a senator. But he was a lawyer, of course. They're all fucking lawyers. All the crooks in Georgia are lawyers. And so Coverdell said, yeah, come on up on this Saturday, and you can help out and volunteer on the phones. So I came up. There were other volunteers up there. They gave me this list of donors to call. So Vice President George Bush was coming to, I think, the Radisson downtown to do a fundraising luncheon. It was something like $500, $1,000 a plate for some stupid meal they had. And then, you paid a little extra money. You got your picture taken with the vice president, shaking hands. You put that photo up in your office and shit like that. So all these big Republican businessmen all over the state of Georgia were coming up or coming down to get their picture taken and listen to George Bush speak for 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever. So Mr. Coverdale was covering all that. But what had happened is that the Secret Service said, no, we're going to need, to push back the time that people get there. They need to get there in like another hour or two ahead of time for the security. And so my job was to call all the people and tell them they need to get there that day another hour or two ahead of time, which kind of pissed some people off because some guys were coming from Savannah and Waycross and Valdosta, and that's a good 5-hour drive. And now they had to leave an hour or two earlier. And a lot of them kind of barked at me. I was speaking to all these big, powerful fucking Republicans. They're probably all dead now, but I don't know who they were. Anyway, so when we finished, Senator Coverdell, he had him retype up the list. And this was the list that he gave me. And instructions were like this. They sealed up the list, put the envelope in my hand. He gave me like $20 for gas and parking and something to eat. And he said, I want to thank you for your service, son. You've done your country a really good service. Okay. Very, very proud of, got young men like you. Georgia could use more young men like you. Thank God I'm not a Republican anymore. Anyway, bullshit. And, me, I was raised to respect elders and respect older people. And God, if you're a lawyer or a senator or something like that, you were like a step down from God, And I thought he was an elected official. So I was just like, hey, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And he goes, now, son. And he looks at me. He put his hand on my shoulder, looked right in my eye, and he points at me. He goes, now, I want you to take this list, and there's a name on there, Secret Service agent so-and-so. I want you to go to the Radisson, give this list only to him, no one else. He's the only one that's going to get it, okay? And I'm like, yes, sir. All right, man. Go, son. Go, go, go. It's like Herschel Walker. Give him the ball and go. Go, go, go. And so I went off on my mission. It was my, Mission Impossible. I was Tom Cruise or whatever that guy's name is in that movie. And I get in my car, drive downtown to the Radisson. I find my parking. And as I'm approaching, you go through this cordon of, there's a policeman on every corner. And then as I'm passing by, they're radioing, there's this kid coming, and shit like that. And then, you got policemen and sheriffs and other people stopping you saying, whoa, where are you going, son? I got to go see the Secret Service agent. I've got a list from, Paul Coverdale, Senator Paul Coverdale. Give me this list, And they're like, okay, well, follow me. I go in, and then this Secret Service agent comes over, and I got this list that's given from Paul Coverdale. I'm supposed to give it to Secret Service agent so-and-so. And he goes, okay, well, just give it to me. I'll give it to him. I went, no. And the senator said, no, I'm supposed to give it only to him and no one else. And the Secret Service agent didn't look too happy about that. So he said, well, okay, let's go. And so I follow him going across this hotel. It was that hotel, I think it's the Radisson, the one, everybody knows it if you're from Atlanta, and it kind of slopes upward inside. It's got a big open area, and like level 2 is just a little bit out further from level 1, and then 3 is a little further, and then finally it all connects at the top up there, the balconies and stuff. And so we get in the elevator, and then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 other Secret Service agents get in there. What really surprised me is they didn't check the envelope. I mean, it wasn't a really big envelope, but God, I could have had a pipe bomb in there. I could have had a bomb. Who knows? Plastic bomb. But they didn't check it at all. And all these agents are in there as they go up like the 10th floor or some shit like that. Get up there, and then they march me around to this room that kind of faces out onto the street. And the door is open, and there are Secret Services agents everywhere. And nearly every level, there are police and guys walking around. And as soon as we walk into the room, like 20 Secret Service agents or guys in suit. They look just like those FBI guys I saw in the Holiday Inn or the Hilton down at the airport where my mom was working. And it was all exactly the same thing. They all turned like robots. They all had full suits in July with vests and ties. And some of them had their jackets off, and you could see, they had the shoulder holster with the gun sitting in there. And they're all wearing sunglasses, and they're all looking at me like, what the fuck is this kid doing here? Is this another John Hinckley? What the hell's going on? And I'm amazed because there's computers everywhere, computer screens, and there's racks of guns everywhere. I mean, it was amazing. And this guy that I was with, he called out the Secret Service agent's name. Yeah, I'm busy. He's got the list from Paul Coverdale. Okay, well, bring it here, son. And I bring it to him. And I said, what's your name? So-and-so. Yes, that's me. Can't you see? He's got like some kind of badge on or something like that with his name. And I said, yes, sir. And, okay, well, give me the damn list. And I give him the list. Thank you. I'm expecting maybe he's going to shake my hand or pat me on the back. No. He's like, well, what are you waiting around for? And I was like, okay, thank you. Bye, sir. And I left, went out the door. And the Secret Service agents all followed me down, and they kind of almost followed me to my car, And I'm sure they were looking at the list and calling Paul Coverdale. Did this kid, did you send this kid down here to deliver this list and shit? And it was a scary, scary moment. I mean, I never realized. I mean, you see these videos with these policemen that just kind of act like robots and unfeeling, and they just start shooting and stuff. Well, I don't know if they train these guys to be hardcore, but I don't know. It was very frightening to me between the FBI agents and the Secret Service agents to see people that they just looked like hardcore killers. Like they were wanting to kill every and anybody. you know, all dressed in suits. But anyway, all right. So let's see. We'll keep going here. We got 15 more minutes, and hold on one second. All right. So right next, right next to the at 1201, which is right there, Colony Square. So there's like 1175, and then there's 1201. 1175 is an older building, okay? And like I said, on the 22nd floor is where Eugene Smith's office was, approximately about right there in the middle. And right here is 1201. And in this building, there was a company that moved into this building back in 1979 called Cobra International. Okay. And one of the officers on that, the CEO, was a guy named Mitch Werbel. Now, if you're into the anybody but Wayne theory, you're going to hear the name Mitch Werbel. Okay. And he's basically this mercenary ex-military guy for hire. And from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, he was involved in all kind of little military adventures, selling guns. I think he might have been even involved in Iran Contra, some bullshit like that. But his main base was out in Powder Springs, okay? Um, but he incorporated right here with his attorney, Mr. Peter Reed. Yeah, CT Corporation and Peter Reed. And back in March of 1979, before the Atlanta child murders started. I don't know what Cobra is. I think it was some kind of like weapons manufacturing or international arms selling or something like that. But you'll hear, it's always interesting to me that they say that anybody but Wayne crowd will say that Werbel was involved in bringing the kids out to Powder Springs or someplace in the woods somewhere and doing experiments on them and killing them. Okay. Um, but that Wayne somehow was involved in that he was either brainwashed or he was blackmailed and he was trained. Okay. And that this story actually doesn't really help Wayne, that Wayne actually killed them. He would bring them out there. They would experiment on them, do God knows what for the CIA. And this is all kind of fantasy bullshit. And then Wayne, either someone out there would kill him or Wayne would kill him. Okay. I don't know. It kind of far fetched to me. But you hear Wayne talk about, he writes this book that never gets published, I think, called Finding Myself, where he talks about how he's recruited when he's like 16, 17 through the ROTC, junior ROTC recruitment program. It was some kind of CIA front. Werbel was some kind of CIA contractor, some bullshit. And they would take him out there and let him fire guns and taught him how to kill people with the chokehold. I don't know. I know Wayne definitely used chokeholds in killing some of his victims, but I don't know about all this stuff with Werbel. But anyway, that was right there. In that same building, okay, was the office of Wayne's attorney later on by the name of Lynn Watley. Okay. And Wayne's attorney, Lynn Watley, was since basically Mary Welcome left about 82 to, I don't know, about 10 years ago when this other lady took over from Noonan. And Lynn Watley was an associate of Ed Garland, of course. He was picked by Ed Garland to, take care of Wayne, keep him quiet, run his little legal things. And they gave him a certain stipend every month, and he barely did anything. Okay. And you'll hear in the Atlanta Monster where he's very hard to get a hold of. and stuff like that. All right, we'll keep going. And then just kind of one street over was another attorney of Wayne Williams for a short while in the very beginning until he had a conflict with Mary Welcome by the name of Tony Axum. Okay. Now, Tony Axum, um, he got kind of into a little tussle with Mary Welcome. And of course, I'll go over this about the attorneys. How it worked was immediately upon Wayne Williams' indictment and arrest, Ed Garland steps forward. And then he appoints Mary Welcome to be Wayne Williams' attorney. And then Mary Welcome gets Axum to come in. And Axum brings in another attorney by the name of Robert Fryer. And, you know, it's just odd that a multimillionaire, very, very wealthy drug and porn attorney, this was Thevis's attorney, okay? He was fighting for Thevis even in 1981. Ed Garland was the attorney on record for Thevis, okay? So he's fighting for Thevis, this multimillionaire, and then I guess he just decided to go off and do a charity case and help this poor black indigent child serial killer for no reason. Okay. They didn't have any money. Remember, he kept saying they didn't have any money. And then he went off and they hired Binder to kind of do the cross examination. Okay. But that was his office, Tony Axum's office right there. Eventually he gets let go. Tony Axum, again, will mimic almost exactly what Ed Garland does. All his clients are high profile, basketball players, drug dealers, all kinds of stuff like that. And then later on in the 90s or early 2000s, he will get arrested for money laundering. So basically, his clients were using him to funnel money, okay, from like another drug dealer. They're using Axum to funnel the money to him, okay, for the defense. And you know, the government's not stupid. They monitor these transactions, and they traced it to Axum. They figured out what was going on. Um, he never reported his income, and so they arrested him. I think he went to jail for a little bit, lost his law license. I think he's up in Washington D.C. as a public defender. And then you had this other guy. I'm gonna come across him just a little later here, by the name of Robert Fryer, that was an associate of Tony Axum also. All right, now just right up the road at 1409, back in 1962, okay, you had a company start up by the name of Dixie Books. Now, Dixie Books will eventually morph into Pendulum Press, and that will be Thevis's, porn umbrella empire, I guess you could say. And that's right there. And notice how it's just literally just blocks away. It's just a few blocks from Colony Square, but it's also just right around the corner from WSB. But, and again, you see the attorney on record there's Robert Smith, okay, and then there's John Havens. Ralph Mitchum will get arrested and tried with Thevis because he assisted Thevis uh, after he got out of jail and is, hunting down of Roger Underhill. So let's see. We'll keep going. How much time we have left? Got about 6 minutes. Okay. So now we have UX Firm. Now this is started by James Jen Jr., the son of Jimmy Jen, and it's sort of a consulting firm. I don't know exactly what they're consulting on, but some kind of business consulting. He's kind of on the paperwork, but there's really this woman who's running it, and they're listing it at her address over here in Piedmont Park, right there at Oakmont. which is kind of close to where my mom had been living. But yeah, and then there's white columns. Hold on one second. Is there anything else? Ah, now here's Robert Fryer. We'll end real quick with this because I think I'm about out of time. So Robert Fryer was another attorney on the Wayne Williams defense team, and he was brought in by Axum. Okay, and they're birds of a feather type lawyers because they'll end up doing exactly the same thing. Robert Fryer will have some drug clients. He'll launder some money for them, and then he'll get arrested, um, lose his law license, and go to jail for not reporting income and lying to the police. But in 1972, okay, my mother and I went to this office right here, and let's see, 1795. Yeah, it was right there. See, it's an older type building. Yeah, so in 1972, my mother was referred to this office by Michael Thieves. Okay, so Robert Smith wasn't a divorce attorney or child custody attorney, but Robert Smith could handle stuff like that. And so that's where Thieves sent my mom. And so she could get some legal advice about getting us back from my dad back in maybe 73, 74, 74, I think. So, but another thing will happen with Robert Fryer before he goes to jail in the late 80s, late 80s. He has some mob contacts up in New York, and they contact him. Another lawyer who's a mob lawyer up there will contact him and said, "Hey, I don't know why they chose him. We want you to be involved in a prisoner exchange." So there have been these West German, and American that had got caught in Czechoslovakia, I think on some drug charges or something like that. They were smuggling for the mob. They were smuggling heroin into Czechoslovakia or out of Czechoslovakia or something like that for the mob. And they had been in prison since the 70s. And so this mob lawyer contacted Fryer. I think Fryer had some contacts with the CIA or something like that. And he was kind of the go between, uh, negotiating an exchange. So they had some prisoners in spies. Check this Czech couple had been involved in this sex scandal in in Washington D.C. They would invite State Department employees over and White House employees and congressmen stuff like that over, and they'd have big orgies there, and they'd record everything of it, and they were blackmailing people. Okay, and so they exchanged them and another person for these two Germans and this one American, and this was all set up by the mob through this attorney and then through Robert Fryer. And Robert Fryer had some kind of CIA, FBI contacts or something like that, and but then later on he gets in trouble for laundering money for the mob. But anyway, so my mom in like 1973, 74 had gone to him. I remember sitting in his office. I was just could barely read letters, and I'm sitting there trying to read his diploma because I remember that F and the letter R and the I and the E and the R, and I'm sitting there trying to read that out loud. And but I remember Mr. Fryer came out and patted me on the head and shit like that. Although I was like 8 years old, wasn't like really a little. I wasn't a real little kid, but you know, I just remember going to this office and I remember Robert Fryer. So another weird fucking connection. But so we'll continue from here. We'll keep going up Peachtree Street. I'm going to show you more connections and between the Atlanta child murders and Thieves and me and my family. All right, take care. Until next time, adios.